Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in today. I had to do a video about this band that has some of the best guitar work in the history of heavy rock music. If you love guitar riffing and soloing, this band is heaven on earth for you. And who doesn't like that? So you're a stoner rock fan. The riff is everything for us. And it's that time of year. You know, I'm a big seasonal guy when it comes to listening to music and different types of music depending on the type of year, the season. We get all 4 seasons in the Midwest where I live. They're very pronounced. The weather changes, and my listening habits change with the seasons. And once we get into the fall and the leaves are falling off the trees and it's Thanksgiving time, November, October time frame, this band really, just something about this band during that time of year really hits me in the sweet spot and gives me goosebumps, and it's just perfect for this time of year. This is a band that everyone should know, and I'm sure a lot of you know this band. They're pretty famous band. They're not Led Zeppelin famous, but they're pretty famous, and they've had a 50-plus year career. Going on 55 years. They're still together now. Some of the members have left, but one of the main guys who formed the band is still there, and they're still actually performing and releasing albums. So it's pretty impressive. Long career. I'm going to talk about their early work. The band is called Wishbone Ash. How many of you know Wishbone Ash? Hopefully, many of you. They're a British rock band that were formed in 1969. They released their debut album in 1970. In December. It was recorded in September of 1970. So that's this album right here. One of their all-time best albums for sure. Not their most famous album. I also have that one here called Argus. Definitely their most famous album. This was their 3rd album. These are the best 2 albums from Wishbone Ash. So they're the 2 albums that I'm going to focus the most on in this video. But like I said, the riffing with Wishbone Ash makes them perfect for stoner rock fans. They're known, very famous for their dual guitar. And they're the best twin guitar band I've ever heard. Extensive use of harmony. Very melodic, bluesy. The guitar riffs soar, and soar, and soar, and play off of each other, and it's like you're in this symphony of guitar, and it's beautiful, truly beautiful. You gotta have no heart or soul at all to not feel anything when you're listening to Wishbone Ash. So I'm gonna go into both of these albums, talk about the history of the band, talk about the albums. I believe I wrote reviews for the albums, so I can read that to you, give you a slideshow of the pictures and everything. Read probably a little bit out of the booklet. Argus has a nice booklet that I can read a little bit out of. But they were formed by Andy Powell and Ted Turner. Those were the dual guitar guys. Very famous dual guitar players. And Andy was also he's the guy that's still anchoring the band to this day. He's the one that's still there. Ted Turner did leave the band. They also had Martin Turner. So they had 2 Turners in the band. Argus is still considered one of the best albums of 1972. So let's talk about the band, let's talk about the albums. masterpieces of progressive, heavy, psych, folksy, hard rock, bluesy, very progressive, folksy, hard rock. A lot of medieval themes, as you can tell by the album artwork of Argus. You know, you can see what they're kind of about, and they have a song. These songs called like Warrior and Throw Down the Sword and The King Will Come. The King Will Come was amazing. A very amazing song. So, a lot of atmosphere, a lot of old school atmosphere from previous times in history. Very cool, if you're into that. Let's talk about Wishbone Ash, a band that everybody on this channel should know. Thanks for watching. Doom on. Thank you for listening to my presentation today about Wishbone Ash, the very famous and awesome British progressive heavy psych Buttes. These guys have to be heard by everybody, so for those that have not quite dug into them yet, here's your chance to go check them out. Let's talk a little bit about them. They were formed in 1969, originally by Martin Turner, and he was their lead vocalist, the lead lyric writer for the band, and the bass guitar player as well. He formed the band in 1969, originally out of another trio called the Empty Vessels in 1963, so technically the roots of Wishbone Ash go all the way back to the early 60s, but eventually Martin recruited, along with Steve Upton, the drummer. It was him and Steve Upton were the original two members in the early to mid 60s, and eventually by the late 60s they were setting up auditions for guitarists, and they ended up with two guitarists, which were Andy Powell and Ted Turner. Now imagine you're holding auditions for your band and people of that caliber show up, and you can't, so they couldn't decide obviously between those two, so they actually just added both of those guys, and it was a legendary decision that totally changed music. It's what they're famous for, their beautiful twin guitar attack of Andy Powell and Ted Turner. And boy, are they a fantastic, sweet, beautiful, ethereal combination. When you listen to Wishbone Ash, their music is just so emotional. Emotion is the key word that I think of when I think of their music because of the guitar playing. It's really just, it flies and it soars, and it has this beautiful melodic tinge to it, and the harmonies are amazing. It's that type of music that gives you goosebumps and takes you places and really evokes a lot of emotion in you. And they were putting out their first album. It's a self-titled album, which is one of my favorite albums from Wishbone Ash, in 1970. This album has 6 tracks, and it closes with 2 10-plus minute tracks. So it's over 20 minutes for the last 2 tracks, and they really stretch it out on the last 2 tracks. Quite the experience. But the first 4 tracks, they're more straight-ahead rock songs. They have some very famous songs like Queen of Torture. Queen of Torture is a fantastic song, and the shortest song on the album at around 3 minutes and 20 seconds long. It's a really hard-hitting song, probably the hardest rocker on the album, the heaviest song from a rocking standpoint on the album. Lady Whiskey and Errors of My Way are 6 to 7 minute songs. They're bluesy, not quite as progressive as the last 2 tracks on the album, not nearly as long either, but they have nice bluesy feel to them, some great guitar riffing, very good songs. But the album really closes with the 2 masterpieces, Handy and Phoenix. One is 11.5 minutes and one is 10.5 minutes. Handy, it has some of the most beautiful guitar solo work, twin guitar work I've ever heard on it. It has this beautiful 2 to 3 minute section where it's just guitar playing, building off each other, the 2 riffs playing, building, complementing each other. For about 3 minutes straight, you get to hear this absolutely gorgeous riff and just melody of riffs. And of course, the end of the song goes into this crazy boogie-woogie, fast-paced rocker. Like the first half is like a really slow build and a lot of melodic, atmospheric, slow, progressive riffing, and then it just breaks down into this fast-paced boogie for the last few minutes. It's like a totally different song in the last 3 minutes of the song. So it's like having 2 songs in one. It's one of their all-time best. It's one of my favorite Wishbone Ash recordings. Phoenix is an epic song, a very catchy song, catchy chorus, like the anthem of the album, like the Stairway to Heaven of the album. An absolutely fantastic closing track that will get caught in your head, and it closes the album with one of the best tracks. I wrote a review for the Self-Titled album, so I wanted to read that real quick. It says, "Everyone should know these guys. I'm hoping my Smod faithful have done their due diligence here. Their classic 1970 Self-Titled debut is what's in my stereo. These guys have to be one of the greatest bands of that era, and that's saying a lot. The band effortlessly combines elements of blues, folk, and progressive rock. It's really a thing of beauty. Perhaps best known for their lethal twin guitar attack. That's got to be the best twin guitar band of all time. This attack comes from Andy Powell and Ted Turner. Andy is widely regarded as one of the greatest guitarists of all time. Hard to disagree when you hear him let loose. Side 2 of this album is especially good, comprising of 2 long, jam-heavy pieces. Handy has some of the most stellar guitar work I've ever heard. It just lifts you up and makes you feel like you're flying with the birds. Phoenix is an absolute anthem and ends the album on a monumentous count. These 2 tracks are worth the price of admission alone. If you haven't heard Wishbone Ash, you're really missing out on one of the finest of all time. The riffs are magnificent and the songwriting is melodic and powerful. The vocal work is also excellent from Martin Turner, and it's also shared between the other band members. So if you're looking for a place to dig into these guys, they have about 30 albums over the course of 30 years. This Self-Titled is a great place to start. It's one of their greatest achievements. And then get Argus. Argus is widely considered their masterpiece, and it's incredible indeed. Favorite tracks are Queen of Torture, Handy, and Phoenix. So after they put out their Self-Titled album in 1970, they released another album the next year called Pilgrimage, which is not as good as the Self-Titled album, but it's still a very worthy album with some great songs like The Pilgrim on it. And this band would end up releasing tons and tons of albums. They were a very, very prolific band, one of those types of bands that would release an album just about every year. The next year, this is 3 consecutive years, in 1972, they released their best known, most acclaimed album called Argus, and this album has a lot of progressive folk rock. It's a lot less bluesy and often less heavy than the Self-Titled album. It's a little more polished as well production-wise. The first album is more rough production-wise. Argus, you can see why when you listen to it, that it's the most famous, most successful Wishbone Ash album because it has the most accessible songwriting. All the songs are extremely catchy, featuring some fantastic choruses, some melodies, just some guitar playing, and just the songwriting. Very, very catchy. It's got that really cool medieval theme to it with songs like The King Will Come and Warrior, as well as Throw Down the Sword. Now, Time Was opens the album, and it's a 9.5-minute epic opening track. Definitely one of the best on the album. The vocals are shared by both Martin and Ted, and that was a theme throughout a lot of their songs. They would share vocal work. And this album really does feature a ton of different singers. Even Ted Turner gets to sing on a few tracks. So they're very well represented vocally on this album. And definitely a lot of songwriter, a lot of mixed songwriting as well. Everybody contributed in this band to the songwriting. But Martin was definitely the guy who was responsible for doing the most, I believe, lyric writing of the band. Sometime World is a softer song, a very beautiful song, lots of atmosphere. Blowin' Free is kind of like a radio anthem for the band. It's like if there was one song that was going to get a lot of radio play and be a hit single, Blowin' Free would be that one. Just a very, very catchy song and very beautiful as well. Side 2 opens with one of my all-time favorite Wishbone Ash songs, probably my favorite song on the album, The King Will Come. 7 minutes long, very, very catchy. This one will get caught in your head, and it's also probably the heaviest, along with Warrior, on the entire album. The King Will Come is 7 minutes of heavy riffing and beautiful vocal work, catchy songwriting. Warrior, obviously, is also another one of the best songs and one of the heaviest songs on the album as well, with some fantastic lyrics about freedom and stuff like that, which you gotta love. The people who sing about independence and freedom and fighting tyranny, and this guy sings about being a warrior for his freedom. It's a very, very epic track that just makes you feel like riding into battle and defeating the enemy. So this album is definitely one of their best albums. It's their most famous album. It's considered one of the most accomplished albums of 1972. I did write a review for this one as well, so I'd like to read that now. Now here's an album you can safely classify as classic. It's Argus by the great Wishbone Ash. It's the perfect soundtrack to a late autumn afternoon. Released back in 1972, Argus is still considered and hailed as one of the best albums of the 70s. These guys were really good. They were known for their twin guitar attack, which is absolutely mesmerizing. Argus is their third album, and definitely among their finest. I like the self-titled a little more, so check that one out too. Although I'm not sure I still hold the opinion that I like the self-titled more. This was written back in the 2010s, 2019. I've grown on Argus a lot since then, and I definitely consider it just as good as the self-titled. Obviously in a slightly different way, because they're different albums. They have different overall sounds to them. They're different beasts altogether, but they're definitely both of the same quality overall from front to back. The album is medieval themed, featuring a blend of progressive rock, folk, and hard rock, and is considered a landmark album in progression of twin lead guitar harmonization, later adopted by the bands such as Thin Lizzy and Iron Maiden. These guys are definitely what you'd call rock gods. Don't let them slip by. Check them out now. Favorite tracks: Time Was, Blowin' Free, The King Will Come, and Warrior. So of course, Wishbone Ash would continue to release more albums after Argus. They have a very, very prolific career. They released Wishbone 4 in 1973, There's the Rub in 1974, Locked In 1976, New England in 1976, Front Page News in 1977, No Smoke Without Fire in 1978, and it just goes on and on and on and on and through the 80s as well. They basically released one album every year all the way through the early 80s, only missing a year here or there. So, I mean, these guys were one of the most prolific bands of the 70s and 80s, and they are still together, although the only member left from the original band is Andy Powell. Martin Turner was replaced way back in the 80s. It's really too bad that all the members are not still together, because I believe they're all still alive, and it would be really cool to have that type of unit of excellence together still. But you can still see Wishbone Ash, even in its abbreviated state. To this day, they are still performing in 2023 with Andy and, of course, a few new members. So Wishbone Ash is one of those bands that has to be heard from everybody that really values guitar playing. And if you're listening to this channel, guitar playing has got to be one of your most treasured things on this planet. So Wishbone Ash, for guitar players, guitar enthusiasts, riff enthusiasts, is a band that can absolutely not be skipped. So just in case some of you haven't heard of Wishbone Ash, on the off chance, now's your chance to go check them out. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you soon.